It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. Take Command podcast. Logan Paulson there. Craig Hoffman here. NFL draft over. We did it, Logan. We survived yet another draft season, filling people's brains with knowledge of players that we'll see on other teams, and 5 that we'll see on the Commanders.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was talking to Dan Quinn. We did an interview with him on the Command Center show. It's on the Command Center's YouTube page. You can check it out. And one of the things he said was like, everyone's like, this is a lot of work for very little payoff. You know, you watch 300 guys, you know, obviously the director of college scouting is probably watching closer to 500 guys. And you take 5 people. So it's like a 1 to 100 ratio in some cases. And he said, I don't look at it that way. I look at this as the best way to learn the league, which I thought was a really insightful thing. And I kind of now I'm like, okay, you know, now you kind of get the landscape of where these guys are going, what they are. And when they hit free agency, you have some file on them. Yep. So I think it's, again, it's a lot of work, a lot of prep, but I do think there is a benefit outside of just the draft. And I think when you have a coach that's bringing that to your attention, obviously, it's important because like that shows you how locked in the whole staff is and how locked in they will be moving forward when they're looking for people that can bring in.
100%. I felt that this year in a way that was different for me. Not that people care about my or your. I mean, they care about your draft process. I don't know how many people care about mine, but just 30 seconds. Like, I feel like I had a more of a file on more guys this year than any draft I've ever covered. And I think it's in part because there's never been more possibilities for the team that I covered to take certain players at 29. I mean, we probably studied like 20, 25 guys in depth for the 29th pick, and Josh Connerly wasn't even really one of them, and then they took him. So then you do your crash course on Connerly. Like I had a small file on Connerly, but then you go watch him and do some more research. But I do feel like, you know, guys go off the board here, guys go off the board there, and you're like, oh, I get that, or I don't get that. You understand how they fit in certain places because you have that deeper file. And just like you said, that will help when we preview games this year, like, oh, watch out for the rookie here because we know that he does this well, and we can see how it plays out. But also then, you know, 3-4 years from now in free agency, when these guys hit and become available, you do have some level of file. And, you know, for the stats that go through that year over year, it does help, obviously, in the future. All right, with that said, how'd they do? Let's start off there. Before we dive into like who these guys are, when you look at the Commanders, the how'd they do question is close to the what grade do you give them question. And I am team I hate draft grades because we don't know until 5 years from now. But if you look at kind of what we hoped they would get out of it and what they did get out of it, how do you feel about how they approached this draft and any major kind of storylines that stick out to you, positive, negative, neutral?
Well, I got to give our guy Jeremy Green a shout out. You know, I was talking to him last night a little bit, kind of texting back and forth.
He's
about
still
what
awake.
I mean, I don't think that guy sleeps. You know what I mean? He's
about to enter hibernation.
Yeah, right, exactly. And we were talking about Connerly and, you know, how much we liked him and how much he liked him. And, you know, he brought up something that I thought was really interesting. It's like, you know, when you look at the offensive linemen, obviously there was 4 kind of top kind of like first round tackles, let's say, guys that you'd give a first round grade to. And then after Connerly, there weren't any, right? It kind of becomes a little bit land of the Wild West. And, you know, Arian Tierstre's in there. There's some other guys that kind of fall in that mix, but nobody you feel as good about as those top 4 guys. So in some ways, like that tackle pick is better because you kind of look at it and you say, oh my gosh, like they still got a tier, like a first round tackle. So for me, that's like a tier 3 player, like kind of should be a first round player, but kind of heading into the second round.
Yeah, that first-second grade.
Yeah, correct. And I think that was like really good insight by him. You know, like that piece, that position becomes more valuable because you're still kind of residing in that first round range, as opposed to edge, for example, which, as the NFL showed us in the draft, like was kind of full of second round players. Like I think everyone kind of had circled Donovan Ezeraku and Mike Green and some of these other guys. But if you look at it, like they were firmly second round players. It wasn't like they were top of the second. They were like 5 to 6, 7 picks in. So I think that's, again, a really interesting perspective on that tackle selection. And then I think when you look at how they handled the cornerback thing, like I remember on draft night when we were kind of going through the picks and I'm crossing off my big board and kind of saying, who's available? What would I do here? And it's kind of between Trey Amos, Landon Jackson, and I forget who the other player was, but there was 2 other players, Shavon Ravel maybe, and then there was a safety or something. And I was like, the best player of this group, in my opinion, or the player with the least amount of questions is Trey Amos. And I felt like they just kind of went down the board and were like, these are the available players. Like Josh Connerly is a first round player for us. He kind of falls in this tier. He's the best. And again, like when I looked at my sheet, it was like, oh, he's the best player available. Like for me even, and I'm not in the room with them. And you go down to Trey Amos and it's kind of the same thing. And I think for those first two picks, like just being so process driven was fantastic. And then you get to their kind of later round picks, your Jaylin Lanes, your Kain Medranos, your what's his name? Jackson, is that how you say it?
Jacory Croskey-Merritt.
Jacory Croskey-Merritt.
Hey, look, his nickname's Bill, and Jacory, we're gonna call you Bill because apparently that's what everybody calls you. And then we're gonna get his name correct, the hyphenated Croskey-Merritt and all, but we can just call him Bill.
Yeah. And I look at those players, and we've talked about them a little bit offline, and they are just good ball players, right?
Yeah.
They're competitive, they're tough, they're smart, and we'll talk about them more specifically. But when they picked Lane, I think I texted you, and I was like, dude, I like this player quite a bit.
Pumped.
And then
not as pumped as you were for Medrano, but
yeah, we'll talk about him more in a second. But I just think you go down the list, and you're like, good football player that adds value right now. Kain Medrano, good player that adds value right now, and then Croskey-Merritt, like he is an interesting guy because he didn't play last year. He played one game last year, but if you watch him at New Mexico, like he has all of these kind of like running back traits. Now he's a 7th round pick. He's just above kind of being a UDFA, but I think he's extremely talented. And so I like the ability that they showed in the first round to be extremely disciplined and find the best player. And I think they all kind of fit a certain level of need, which is great. And then when you get to the second round, to find these pieces that are just like, they feel like they're going to make your football team is the way I would say it. And like when you look at other people's drafts, I don't always feel that way. You know what I mean? I'm not always like, oh, like this, there's no way this guy makes this team because they have this person here. He's going to be on the practice squad. This feels like kind of a wasted pick. I feel like these three guys, and I'm not just saying this, like this is supported in my evaluation. Like Kain Medrano was a top 100 player for me, so for him to be there, for them to get him in the 6th round, the role, the special teams value, all that stuff. I feel that way about all three of those guys.
Definitely. Like they had 5 picks. They had to use them smartly. They had to use guys that were going to make the team. But I think we were talking about this on the phone yesterday. Like, I think these guys not only make it in 2025, I think these guys are on the team in 2026, 2027. Like that is rare in a draft class. And of course it could go sideways because of course it could. Every team is thinking, oh, we just took somewhere between 4 and 11 dudes that are going to make the team and be here in the long term. And there's probably teams that are like, even if this guy doesn't make it in 2025, he's going to be on our practice squad and he's going to start for us by 2027. Like there are teams that think that way, or at the very least are like, hey, he's going to be a special teamer for us for a couple years on his rookie contract, whatever the version of that is. But I think Washington did a really good job of attacking really talented players with both high upside but also usefulness in the immediacy. And Lance Newmark said that Jaylin Lane was also the best player on their board. Now, the best player on the board becomes less critical, less scientific, less whatever the farther down you go. Obviously, like there's going to be way more variance on who the best player is on every team's board the farther you go. But for them, it was an obvious thing, and I think in part because one, we know they wanted to add some speed to that offense. They wanted to add some burst, some pop. But like he's got a use right now, and that's the other thing that Lance said that I liked a lot is they have plans for all of these guys. Like, I think Jaylin Lane is going to be their punt returner and possibly their kick returner in 2025. And then they'll see what he can do on offense. Obviously, Kain Medrano is going to be a special teams guy with his athleticism. And then, could he play more coverage linebacker in certain situations because his coverage skills are so unique? A guy that used to be an offensive player. Like, could you teach him some stuff in third down situations and have him be out there? Like, it's a big role for a rookie, but like maybe. And then, we'll see what Croskey-Merritt's role is, but I think he could be a kick returner or he could obviously be just a running back who you give the ball to and let him be the runner that he is. So I think that's the other thing that's impressive about the 5, Logan, is they have battle plans for these guys. And it just shows, again, a prepared organization that is thoughtful and not just kind of throwing darts at talented athletes, even if all of these guys are extremely athletically gifted in one way, another, or in Kain Medrano's case, all of them.
Yeah, and I think with Jaylin Lane is a good example of this. Like, prior to that pick, I think it was like there was like a pick, like a rash of like 4 edge rushers directly in a row. I'm trying to
Yes.
remember exactly who they were, but it was all guys that I was really high on. I thought, oh man, this is going to be the edge. And and then I think the Colts drafted a tackle, and then obviously the Washington Commanders draft Jaylin Lane, and I liked all those players. I think I texted you. I love players. It was like 121 to 125 or 27. I don't remember exactly the
I think
range,
it was, the Lane was 128. It was 121 to 127 that you were like, dang. 121 was David Walker from Central Arkansas. Lathan Ransom, safety from Ohio State, who they visited with a couple of times, was 122. And then you got the next 3 picks were edges: Jack Sawyer, Baron Scroell, and Kyle Kennard. Dylan Sampson, the running back from Tennessee, was 126, and then your guy Jalen Travis was the Iowa State tackle who went to the Colts at 127, all right before Lane at 128.
And I'm sure I have no inside baseball on this, but I'm sure some of those guys were on the board, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they were in a similar tier to Jaylin Lane, and they kind of fit a more acute need, obviously. And I think the thing that stuck out to me is like we've covered teams in the past where it feels like they've made panic picks. It's like, oh shoot, our guy's off the board. Like, what direction do we go? Like, who do we select? And they've made, quite frankly, bad decisions. And I felt like watching through that, like that would have tripped up another organization, that would have tripped up a team that was less prepared. And for them to be able to like, oh yeah, Jaylin Lane. And I think I told you this, like he was a guy that I was watching another player from Virginia Tech, and he just consistently popped in terms of his competitiveness at the catch point, his vertical speed. And that offense in Virginia Tech is terrible. Like it's like this weird kind of like run and shoot RPO hybrid, but like they take these deep play action shots on the field. And for him to find a way to like show up as a blocker, to show up and making explosive plays, I thought was really fantastic. So when he says he's a good football player, like there's no doubt in my mind. And then when you go back, like you said, and you watch his highlights, you see a guy who has the ability to create after the catch, has some good contact balance, and can return kicks. And so it could have gone sideways really quick there, I think.
Yeah.
If you're like, man, we have to get an edge at 128. We have to. Like, just to effortlessly pivot and be like, no, we're okay. Like, this is the best player on our board, or this is the player we value right here. And he has a skill set that, like you said, is going to see the field. I thought, again, it just showed great composure by the staff and great preparation, in my opinion. And we talked about it with Connerly. We talked about it with Amos. Like, the way the board fell was a little bit dicey, in my opinion. And you could have made a weird decision. But they just kind of were like, all right, we trust our board. We trust that game that we played in the weeks leading up, where it's like, if it's this player and it's this player, and we just got on base. And I just really appreciated that. And I just thought, that 4th round pick was really interesting because of the landscape leading into it.
Yeah. Although I will say this, Lance Newmark afterwards said entering day 3, Lane was their number 1 player.
Wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me.
Every team always says that. What are they going to say? Oh, no, he was the 5th player on our board when we drafted, but we passed up the 4 other guys because, like, what would make sense to complete that sentence? Absolutely not. I mean, I guess it was a position of need. Okay, whatever. But, like, maybe those edges weren't ahead of Jaylin Lane
totally
on the board. But I do think it's worth mentioning. This is one thing I did want to talk about. The one... I don't call it downside, negative. I'll call it a negative, but like not that they did a bad job, which will make sense in a second. I'll just say the thing, Craig. They didn't have flexibility to move in this draft. No. And so the one downside to kind of having the 5 picks is they had the 5 picks and there was no way to trade up if a run on a position happened. And so they have this run where from 121 David Walker to 125 Kyle Kennard, there's 5 picks and 4 of them are edges. And if David Walker comes off the board, most teams would go, oh God, here we go. If they really, really, really wanted an edge, and they would say, let's go flip a 5th or flip a 6th to move up 3 or 4 spots, or even let's flip a future 5th to move up. Commanders have 5 this year, 5 next year. They couldn't do that. And so I believe them when they say Jaylin Lane was the best player on their board and that the run on edges they didn't really care about. But it is worth saying that they didn't really have the optionality once that run started. So they were a little bit boxed in. But I actually don't know how much it affected their draft based off their board. And certainly, they're telling us it didn't. And I guess it's up to all of us whether we believe them or not.
Yeah, and again, like I think when you look at Jaylin Lane and you look at what he does and how he's going to be at the NFL level, like I'm very confident. Like he's one of those guys you watch and you're like, man, you're just going to be a good pro. I don't know if you're not gonna be a first or second or maybe even a third round pick, and obviously gets picked in the fourth. But like you just are a very high floor with a high ceiling kind of prospect. And if you look at the way they went, with the first two picks, like that's exactly what those guys are: high floor, and there's some potential there to be high ceiling players as well. And so it wouldn't surprise me if he was the number one player on their board. It wouldn't surprise me in the least because he is that talented. But I do think like it's important to note, like edge was kind of this position that at least the media identified as something that they wanted to, that the media felt that the Commanders should address. Here's this run of players that I think are pretty gosh darn good. I know they met with Kennard at the combine. I know they had David Walker in for a 30 visit, and they met with him at the combine, and they met with him at the Senior Bowl. Sorrell was one of those kind of sneaky athletic. I think he almost had a 10 RAS kind of grade, and he was just hyper productive at the Senior Bowl. He was hyper productive in college, just like, what I mean? Just like a really good football player. And I'm not saying they would have picked him, but I am saying like there was some kind of, what is that, like tier 6-7 talent there that could have been pretty devastating. Like they could have gone in that direction had they chosen to, but obviously like I think Jaylin Lane's a heck of a football player. And I love the value that he adds like right now as a return man, as your fourth receiver potentially. And he's got to compete for it, obviously. But he's athletic, man. He ran a 4.3 40. He's got an 11-foot broad jump. You see him catch the football well. And he's this competitive runner with the football in his hands. And I talked to Jeremy about this a little bit yesterday too. He's like, he's kind of like Deebo Samuel light. And when you watch his film, that does come across a little bit, right?
For
kind
sure.
of this pseudo, he's not a running back necessarily, but he's got the kind of contact balance of a running back. So I think it could be pretty cool in this offense where they try to create these space plays for the receivers.
For sure. We'll double click on that in a second. Let's go through all these guys. We'll start with Trey Amos, the second round pick. We obviously talked about Connerly already, so if you missed that episode, check it out. But there's our big picture look at it. Now let's get into some of the details, starting with Trey Amos here on Take Command. Take Command podcast. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulson. Commanders select 5 players in the 2025 NFL Draft. We already talked about Josh Connerly, Logan. He got his own episode. First round picks, they get special treatment. Second round pick, Trey Amos. He could have been the pick at 29, and that's not hyperbole. That is something that Adam Peters said in the press conference, and I believe him. He is someone who is mocked to the Commanders occasionally at 29. He is someone that I think ideally is a second round pick, but we very much thought he would be gone by the time the draft got into the 50s, maybe even into the 40s. And suddenly he was available at 61. What a gift for the Commanders if Trey Amos turns out to be the player that I think a lot of us think that he can be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just really excited about him. And again, like, kind of kicked around the college football landscape. I think he was a Raging Cajun for a little bit early in his career. I think
teammates with Percy Butler and Andre Jones Jr.
Yeah, and then he, obviously goes to Alabama, goes to Ole Miss and kind of finishes his career there. And I do think there is something to that. A guy that kind of had some success early, tried to capitalize on that success at Alabama, saw some adversity, went and kind of made his own way at Ole Miss. I just think like there's something to guys that have experienced the highs and lows in the last 4 years of their college career. And it's something that honestly, the transfer portal, I am not a big fan of it, but I do think it helps you kind of understand the character of a person at a little bit higher level. And that guy, it was not a straight path. It was not a straight path for Jaden Daniels either. And so of the things about his profile, and again, we'll talk about that more specifically in a second, that's one that really sticks out to me, is a guy that kind of said, I want to be a starting football player. I want to be a contributor for a team, and I'm going to find a way to make that happen. And I think when you watch him at Ole Miss, he's big, he's long. I think he's got really good instincts for the position. He's very comfortable. I think he's got the ability to play in man-to-man. And I think the most important thing about his profile is he's got great ball skills. And he's got a really good feel for when the ball's in the air, how to play it. He gets a lot of interceptions, like tough interceptions, like jumping over people, like tracking through traffic, vision on the quarterback type stuff. And I just think about like kind of the ball of clay that he is. He's pretty polished. He's pretty refined. But I think about what that could be with just a little bit better, a little bit more specific coaching. And it gets me really excited, And again, he's got to come in and compete and do all the things. And that's what makes a commander is your willingness to compete. When I look at his profile, like he's done it and he wants it and he's going to make it happen. So if I'm being critical, if there's a reason that I think he did fall to 61, there's times where I'm like, is he the most urgent football player? There's times where he is and there's times where he isn't. So can we get that dial running a little bit hotter more frequently? And again, it's so hard with corners in college right now because of the spread offense and the spread principles and the wider hashes. Like there's times where the corner, like you might as well just take those guys off the field because they're just so uninvolved. It makes the evaluation tough. But I think I'm very, very high on him and the skill set that he brings and how that fits with Joe Witt Jr. specifically in this defense.
Joel Klatt said something that was really good and interesting on NFL Network's draft coverage on Friday. They were talking about one of the receivers, and I think Daniel Jeremiah had said, like, sometimes he takes plays off, and he goes, something that we should say is, and I don't know whether it's the case with this guy, but there are college offenses where they tell the backside receiver, take this play off.
100%.
Like, just don't waste your effort. Just literally take the play off. And so if you're a corner and you know that, it's hard for me to if you're involved and you're not giving action, if you're not giving effort, then we got a problem. But if you're on the backside of a play and you're not really locked in, I'm not going to be like, oh, that guy's not a psycho. It's like he might have been told to do that to save his energy for the next play because he knows he's on the backside of a play with a wide receiver who's not giving a rip on that play either because he's also been coached to do that. So just a fun, quirky college football thing that is worth noting, courtesy of Joel Klatt, who's very good on the college analysis for Fox. I think with Amos, the aggression that he does play with when he is locked in, screams commander.
And I don't want to say that he's not locked in, but there are times where like, oh, like a little more, a little whatever. But I like the player, so don't let me. I'm just saying, like, if there's a reason.
No, 100%. What you said made sense. I was just adding some context to it of something that, like, hey, this is a weird quirk about college football that I didn't know as someone who doesn't watch a ton of college football. That someone who lives in that sport passed along. So, but Amos is aggressive. There's a violence to his play. Like there's all the stuff that the Commanders 100% look for. From Dane's profile in the Beast says at times he can get a little off balance, including as a breakdown as a tackler. But again, when I talk about the attributes I want from a corner, I want him to be a good tackler, but it is not the top trait on the list. Like I want you to be good in coverage, and Trey Amos is really, really good in coverage. I want you to have the traits that I want, that I can mold you if I'm especially a Commander's corner, knowing Joe Witt and Dan Quinn's history with that position, and he's got that. And I think the last thing, Logan, that to me really stands out is what a win for the Commanders is. This is such a slot-heavy group of corners. When Jeremy was on the episode that you were gone, he goes, this is the slottiest group of corners that I ever did see. And so you got a guy that's in a draft full of slot corners, a bona fide outside guy. And he's got some time to learn, because if you need to play Mikey outside and Jonathan Jones inside opposite of Lattimore to start, okay. But hopefully he comes in, he's ready to go. And if he wins that outside job and shows that he's ready, that lets you put Sainer still back in the slot. And then the biggest question, I mean, obviously, you know what the questions are with Mikey in the slot and with a rookie outside. There's going to be ups and downs. But your biggest question at corner all of a sudden becomes like, what is Marshawn Lattimore? Is he the guy that we saw last year against the Eagles? Or is he the guy that we saw last year against some other teams where he played well, and obviously the guy that we've seen for years be great with the Saints? And then if as long as Amos pans out, you figure out Lattimore, either he's good, you re-sign him, keep on moving forward. If he's not, no guaranteed money in 2026, and you're back in the corner market next year for someone to play opposite at Amos and Sainer still. But you've now turned a position group that last year, I don't want to say they ignored. I think last year they took the calculated risk of, hey, we have Emmanuel Forbes. He was a first-round pick a year ago. Let's see what we can get out of him. And then it didn't work. Benjamin St-Juste, he's got all these characteristics. He's 6'3", he's long. Can we coach him up? Nope. All right, fine. Never mind. Last year they took the calculated risk of this position. This year, they addressed it some with Mikey, but they've obviously addressed it with Lattimore and now Trey Amos, and said, all right, we tried it. We tried with the incumbents because we had to try with incumbents somewhere. But now we've turned that position group over to more represent who we want to be.
Yeah, and I think it's also like, we'll see what happens, but just making it more competitive, making the offensive line room more competitive, making the defensive back room more competitive is going to be a big deal. And I know there was a lot of, at least people talking to me was like, oh, we didn't get an edge. I'm really disappointed. But I also think this is a way to maximize the defensive line and the rush that you are able to cultivate, right? And I do think if you watch last year, especially in that first Tampa Bay game, like Joe Witt Jr. did a great job creating pressure. And if the coverage in the back end was a little bit better, like they're way more productive in terms of sacks and pressures and things like that. So I think that's something that's important to acknowledge. Like if this makes you 10% better on the perimeter over what we had last year, like that's going to pay dividends down the road, because ultimately you're looking just for the slightest margins of success. And I think hopefully this is what this gives you. And again, like he's learned multiple systems. He's got great coverage instincts. He's got great ball skills. He's big. He's not super long, but he's long enough, right? And I think the physicality, the play style, that's all there for you. So I'm really excited about both these picks. Again, there's a developmental element to their game. But I think when you look at both of their histories, Connerly and Trey Amos, you think that you're betting on the right type of people to get where they go. And there's no harder position, in my opinion, to play in the NFL than left or right tackle and cornerback in the NFL. So they've got their work cut out for them. But I do think they got the right type of person to get that done. And I think that's extremely exciting. And I can't wait to see him on the field here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. The other thing about the pressure, this is like a small piece of the puzzle, but like I would assume Mikey Sainristil is a better blitzer than Noah Igbenogany.
He was excellent at it in college.
Yeah, he was great at it. So if he's now back in the slot as opposed to outside, what kind of stuff, if once a game you can time that up right and get a pressure, get a sack, get a strip, that creates 2-3 turnovers for you over the course of the year. Whether it's a fumble situation or whether it's just a pressure that forces a bad throw, whatever it is, like that's something that can be added to the pressure package in a more effective way. And like you said, guys like Luvu and Wagner blitzing, they are excellent at it. I think they were the only duo last year in the NFL, linebacker duo, that had 20 plus pressures as teammates. And so how do those pressures get home if the coverage is better? Or quarterbacks just don't feel, if I throw it in the general direction of Benjamin St-Juste, that he'll panic and get a flag, or when Forbes is there, whatever was going to happen with him. So I think that is probably worth mentioning as well. And the pressure stuff, and they didn't force it. That's what we talked about at the top too. They didn't force it with an edge. We'll talk about Kain Medrano, by the way, in a few. Like, he can play a little bit on the edge because he can apparently do everything. We'll get to that in a second. But let's continue on with the next guy, Jaylin Lane, pick 128, round 4 for Washington. We already talked about him a little bit. He's a funny guy to me to watch in some ways, because like when Jamar Chase gets the ball, there's an electricity to the way he runs where you're like, wow, that guy's fast. I don't feel that with Jaylin Lane, despite the fact that he's 4.34. It's just that nobody catches him. It's like he's running, and it's not like it jumps off the screen. You're just like, why is nobody? Like, he is just so naturally fast, and he has like a wider base when he runs, which means when he gets hit, he takes contact and just keeps moving. So the contact balance, the speed, the toughness, like, it is all there. It screams commander. There's an intensity to him. There's a swagger to him. I have no questions as to why they wanted this guy.
Yeah, and I think earlier in the season, I think he was wearing like number 25 or something. It's
a thing at Virginia Tech. You get like I think they do it on a per game basis. So the North Carolina game, he was wearing 25 because I guess he was honored with whatever that is. All the Hokies can let us know in the comments what the exact story with that is. But yeah,
right. But when you're like, oh, he's in 25, he looks like a runner, like a running back, right? Yeah. Like he's got that type of, again, the contact balance, the ability to kind of make people miss. He's got a nice little like double stick suddenness to him. Is he the most refined route runner of all time? Probably not. But I think the thing that's tough for me in this evaluation is that I think I said this already, is the offense of Virginia Tech is like, it's tough to watch. It's like they're kind of in this like triple option zone read, like they tell the backside receiver to take the play off type of deal. And so it's a little bit funky to watch. So, but when you watch, again, even in those moments, you see a guy who's willing and capable and strong enough to go block. You see a guy who is, again, great after the catch. He's good in contested catch situations. And even though he didn't get to show a ton of route running nuance, like when he was at the combine, he didn't stick out in a bad way. You know what I mean? And when you watch his film on a down-to-down basis, you say, oh, that's a really nice comeback. Oh, that's a really nice dig. Oh, that's a really good stem on the post. So I do think it's in there. I'm not sure he got to show it. And this feels, honestly, like I say this all the time, this feels like a Kyle Shanahan receiver. And what I mean by that is, like, when Kyle Shanahan, I think I've told you this before, Craig, drafts wide receivers, like, they're just like good receivers. You know what I mean? They're not like super big. They're not like these crazy, like, RAS people. And I think he probably had a great RAS, but like when you watch the film, like, they feel and they look a certain way. And when honestly, like that's when I watched Jaylin Lane, I kind of had that vibe from him where I was like, oh, you're just good. You're just a good football player. Like, and I know that's kind of like maybe lazy analysis, but when I see a smart, competitive, tough, athletic dude that's like pouring it out for his team and making explosive plays, like I don't know how else to describe him, right? Like it's not always perfect, but like the good is very good. And the little stuff in between is also very good. So obviously there's a reason he's not a first round pick, but I think in the 4th round, this feels like a really, really good value.
I'll tell you, if he was 6'2", 205, I don't know how this dude's not a first round pick because I just looked up his RAS. He is 9.68 out of 10.
Yeah.
That is good for 112th out of 3,441 receivers from 1987 to 2025. So since 1987, of every receiver who has received a raw athletic score, a relative athletic score, he is 112th.
Yeah, and I feel like when you watch him in training camp, like you're gonna feel him. Like, I know you said it doesn't feel like like when you watch him, he doesn't feel like blazing fast. Yeah. But like I don't know, when I watch him on tape, like he's just explosive. He's just an explosive push-up guy, and I really can't wait to watch him. But do I think he's gonna start right away as a receiver? Probably not. I think his value is kind of in like a gadget kind of specialty role. And then I think it's probably as a punt/kickoff return. We'll see how it all shakes out. But he's excellent in that role too. And I think it shows when I see dudes returning kicks, I know you're kind of wired in a special way. And that's another thing that gets me excited because it shows a great competitive toughness. And great story about him is like I go to the combine every year. I sit in like the media section. So it's super quiet. Everyone's really quiet. And he runs his first 40, and there's a section over in the fan section, which is like 2 sections down. So probably like 200 feet away. And they're all wearing 83 jerseys. I'm assuming it's his dad and his grandpa. Like, that's it, 83, that's my dog. And like just the support system that he's got there, the competitiveness from his family. Like if he's anything like the people in the stands, man, we're going to be all right in terms of getting a competitive football player. But that was really cool to see. And I think it kind of informs his background and where he's coming from and how important this is to him.
Yeah, more on his background in a second. I feel like the explosiveness thing that I was saying, it's purely aesthetic. I feel like it's because he's more compact.
I understand what you're saying.
It's more compact, and I feel like Chase is just a little bigger, and like so when he just gets out there, it feels like there's just limbs flying and he's just blazing. But also, it might have just been some of the tape was a little grainier. Maybe it's once you get into the NFL high definition cameras, he'll look a little more aesthetically explosive. But as long as no one's catching him, who cares? Me and Joshua Jaylin Lane have quite a bit in common, though, Logan. We are from the 864. He was born in Spartanburg County in upstate South Carolina, which is the county over from me in Greenville. And then before he was at Virginia Tech, he went to Middle Tennessee State. So we are both Middle Tennessee State transfers. So he and I are going to have a little chat about our old pal Rick Stockstill, who coached him at MT. So it was 3 years at Middle and then 2 years at Tech.
I love that. I love when there's a smaller school guy who's like made his way up, and like I just think it speaks to a football and a personal character. And again, we weren't able to get this a couple years ago, but I love seeing that now.
Yeah, and by the way, his dad cheering him on. That's Coach. His dad's a high school football coach in South Carolina. Including he actually was at the absolute superpower of South Carolina football, James F. Burns High School, and then went to Clover, which is where he had Jaylin, and then now he's at Westside High School, where they won. Coach Lane won the 2023 4A state championship. So grew up around the game. Started off at age 5, being a ball boy for his dad. And why do we know this, Logan?
The beast,
because Dane Brugler's the best. But yeah, really cool story. But also think about what you were just saying about a guy who what you see on tape of his football character. Then I tell you, it's because he's the son of a coach, and you're like, oh, of course.
Yeah, of course. And he's a small school guy, transferred up, promoted himself to talk about a guy you want to bet on, and a guy that you want to support, and a guy that in terms of talent evaluation, it's more than the film. You're betting on a guy that's going to do it the right way. And that's very exciting. And you see why, obviously, the Commanders are so high on him.
For sure. All right, we'll come back. We'll talk about the Commanders' last 2 draft picks. Kain and Bill next on Take Command. Take Command podcast. Logan Paulson there. Craig Hoffman here. talk about absolutely amazing stories, Logan. Your fellow Bruin, UCLA's Kain Medrano. He grew up in Pueblo, Colorado, on a ranch, big old 1,500 acre cattle ranch, 100 miles south of Denver. And now, then he was a wide receiver, and then he switched to linebacker, and now he's a Washington Commander, drafted by a general manager, fellow Bruin, and Adam Peters, and influenced by Ken Norton Jr., Bruin, and Norton coached him at UCLA before he came to Washington. So pretty freaking cool story for this former, not only was a former offensive guy, four-sport athlete at Pueblo East High School, state championship winner as a freshman. Just crazy cool story. And this is a guy that you had as a top 100 player that they took as the 205th pick in the 2025 draft.
Yeah, and I'll acknowledge I knew I was higher on him than the consensus, but like as a coach, like a strength and conditioning coach, like the movement skills that he brought, I just couldn't get over it. So for example, like in the UCLA defense, like he plays star, so kind of like a safety, because like in college they have the wider hashes, so that will linebacker technically by designation, like kind of a nickel player. Like they have to be great against the run and they have to cover wide receivers. So he's doing that. And like, Fred Warner, that was what he did at Utah State, I think is where he went to school, right? So you get really kind of big. He, obviously Kane's 6'3", 220 pounds. Like you get bigger guys, kind of safety body types, but they got to be really good run defenders. So watching him, I forget who it was. I want to say it was against Nebraska. Like run with receivers, like effortlessly open his hips and do things from a movement standpoint that I just was like, not many people in this class could move like that with a receiver, even safeties. Like everyone was talking about Nick Amon-Warry and how dominant he was. Like he can't do that in terms of opening his hips and running with players like that. So that was exciting. And I'm like, well, let's watch him in the box because he also plays Mike linebacker. And against, I think it was in the same game against USC. Like he's the Mike linebacker. They had just moved Olufemi Oladejo to edge, right? And he's like taking on guards and like slipping blocks, and his ability to bend and get his shoulder down damn near past his knee and snake through stuff. I was like, who is this guy? And then against Utah, he's playing like in a 3-4, he's playing a stand-up edge and like rushing the tackle and getting sacks and getting pressures and using the length that he's got, which is like 32, 33 inches, if I remember correctly, kind of in that ballpark, to get pressures. And I just was like, this is unbelievable in terms of what in the course of a 4-game sample, like what he did. I just couldn't get over the movement skills, the athleticism. He forced a bunch of turnovers. I think he had 2 interceptions, 1 return for a touchdown. I think he like ripped the ball out a couple times, like had a couple forced fumbles.
I got a play that I want to talk about with him in a second. But
and so all this stuff is just like, so again, like obviously I'm really high on the movement skills and the athlete. People say, well, like Logan, if he's that good, why'd he go in the 200s? And the one thing I will say about him is he had like a slow start to the 2024 season. And he is not like the most devastating tackler. Like he will tackle you, but it's a little bit like, let me like whistle in your ear and kind of grab, like kind of fall down with you. Like it's not like this collision in the backfield. You do see him make tremendous plays against Utah, for example. Like he's lined up on the ball as an end and he rips inside and has a tackle for loss and saves a touchdown, which is great. Like, so you do see a physicality to him. The way he takes on blocks, I actually think is slightly better than Corey Schwessinger, who went, I think it was the 33rd pick in the draft. Like he does that stuff better with his hands. But when it comes to consistent like space tackling, he's in a good position, but it's like, go shoot your gun. Like it's time. Like this is the moment. And so I think if that's an area that he can prove in, I think you've got to really, and he's great on teams, but like that's one area where I'm like, can we get better there? I hope so.
If he can't do it here, then he can't do it because Dan Quinn, that's a dude who practices tackling in his practices the way they're designed. Ken Norton, Bobby Wagner are the coach and leader of your room, and Frankie Louvu, as violent as they come in the NFL, like he gonna learn. If he is a product, it can become just simply a product of his environment. His environment is going to teach him how to tackle. So that's obviously very exciting if that's an area that he can shore up. The play I want to talk to you about against Iowa is, I thought it was really well put. I wish I remember the YouTube channel that I saw this on, but I was watching some clips earlier. And the guy who was narrating was basically like, this is the Kain Medrano experience. He's lined up as like an overhang nickel in that whatever role you want to call it, a star role in the defense. It's against Iowa. They run an option, a read option. and Medrano plays it really well. He like plays both, kind of shuffles down, then is outside. He's in great position, and the quarterback jukes him and cuts back inside. So he over pursues, and you're like, my guy, come on.
I think
he's able to plant, turn, reverse pivot, really quick recovery because he's athletically insane. Chase the quarterback down, literally grab onto the ball and rip it out with both hands. And you're like, the instincts, the just become a football player, the movement skills, but also you haven't been playing this position very long.
Right.
It's all there in one play. But if at the end we're forced into a fumble, I think obviously a team that where ball is life like the Commanders, you come out of that play with very positive remarks. But it shows the areas where you can improve. It shows the athletic freakiness. And again, apologies to the guy on YouTube who said this, who I thought it was really good. It's like, this is the full experience, and you just see him become a football player. And for a guy that's played offense, he's got some interception returns, and you see him with the ball in his hands and like his ability to run through contact, and you're like, oh, that's a dude that's carried the ball before. Like, he's clearly played offense. The coverage stuff, because he kind of understands route concepts.
Yeah.
And he's comfortable in space. I think that's another thing too. A lot of linebackers, they just get out in space, and it's like Emperor with no clothes, and you're like, whoa, you have never been in this much air before. You just want to run downhill and hit people. And in high school, you probably did, because that's how high school football goes. This dude's the opposite. He came from a receiver to or even like guys that were running back linebackers. This is a receiver who is becoming a linebacker, and if he can complete that transformation, this is a steal. Obviously, it's a big if, but I mean, it's pretty rare what this guy can do in space athletically.
Yeah, and then you watch him at the Shrine Bowl, and like one of the hardest things to do, in my opinion, is do one-on-ones with running backs. And you're watching the first day they did one-on-ones, and he has 2 interceptions in the one-on-one period. And like, I don't think I've ever seen that happen before.
Yeah, one-on-ones are an offense drill.
Yeah, it's 100%. Like, so think about this. It's basically, there's no offensive line. You can go any direction you want. You can go vertical, you run a corner, you can run an out. And so usually linebackers look absolutely ridiculous in that drill. And he is in perfect phase, 2 interceptions, great ball skills. And then you watch him in the team, and he's playing like on the ball linebacker, like a Sam, like in a stand-up, like 3-4 kind of look. And he's juking offensive linemen, dipping. Like, he just had that thing. He reminded me a little bit of Jaron Allen. And the reason I make this comparison is not because I think Kain Medrano is going to be a Hall of Fame player.
Yeah, Hall of Fame defensive end who weighed 70 pounds more.
Right, but Jared Allen had no bones in his body. So you'd go to block him, and you'd think, oh, I've got him. And he would just dip and twist, and like, he's got a little bit of that kind of torso movement to him. And again, it's probably from the receiver stuff, like with the releases and things like that. But again, I think he's going to be a great special teams player from day one. But when you see this kind of athlete, if he can learn how to tackle, and if he can learn how to do some of the more linebackery, even the safety type stuff, maybe they have a rush package for him in certain situations. Like, I'm really curious to see how they see him, because I do think, I will say this, like, if you miscast him, I think he's going to be just kind of a special teams guy for his whole career.
Yeah.
But if you can kind of find a home, find a niche, maybe he's your Jeremy Chin. Like, that's kind of the athlete we're talking about here, like kind of box safety type player. If you can find a role for him where he can be really successful, this could be a really nice piece. Probably not this year, but athletically down the road.
That's interesting, because this would be for this year, but like, that puts him on the field with Bobby and Frankie, and sometimes you're like, how's this all going to work? Because the other guy that's still floating out there is like Dominique Campton, and you're like, oh, what are they going to do with him? So it is interesting to kind of think about the options that they have.
But think more teams, I think, for him to start.
I think that's definitely correct. A guy that might be playing some offense this year, Jacory Croskey-Merritt. And I will transition with this stat. I was ready, as I was preparing here to launch with this, Logan, without realizing the Medrano tie-in. 150 10-yard split for Jacory Croskey-Merritt.
Really?
Which is blazing. Like, that is elite. Medrano ran a 152.
Dude,
that's
and
dumb.
He had like a crazy 3-cone too.
He was 6'9" at his pro day.
And then you get Darren Porter from Iowa State, who ran, I think it was a 6'7" 3-cone, and then Kain is like, what do you say, 6'7",
6'9",
which is insane at that kind of body weight. So like, it just gives you a context for the athletic groupings that he's in. He ran a 4.47, but anyway, the 10 is a huge deal, and a 10 for a running back, like you said, with our guy Merritt, is really, really important because of the acceleration, the contact balance. And you watch him on film, Merritt, and you're just like, you are a runner's runner, right? You've got great contact balance, you've got great feel, great vision. I feel like he's probably a third or fourth round player if he plays in 2024. He played one game in 2024. We talked about this yesterday. They had some questions about his eligibility and how many games he played, like as a freshman or something like that. And they kind of screwed him over because he should have played this year, but he didn't. Only played one game. But when you watch him at New Mexico, when you watch the one game that he did play, you see a very good, just a good runner, right? Good, compact, solid build, great contact balance, and a guy that I think is like obviously when you're a 7th round pick, you're basically just above a UDFA.
Yeah.
But as a runner, like brings something that is very special. And I think that 150 10-yard split is also really indicative of how he plays, because he might not have like the top end, like 40, he might not run a 4.2, but his ability to burst through the hole violently is definitely one of his like superpowers, quote unquote.
Yeah, he's also got a crazy vert. 41 and a half,
really?
which is not,
oh my God,
which is not, this is where the strength coach brain comes in. Like, vertical jump is indicative of your ability to change directions. How quickly can you get down, sink, and then explode back out? Like that is really what vertical jump is. And so the fact that he's got 41 and a half inch vertical, I'm not going to now all of a sudden be like, hey dude, go out there and let's at 5'10", let's go run some fades. Like we're not doing that in the red zone, just throwing jump balls. But like it tells you that burst, that explosiveness and the ability to change direction is really, really special. And watching him run is crazy. By the way, the one game he did play for Arizona, he had 13 carries for 106 yards, I think it was. So talk about some production. Yeah, 13 for 106 and a touchdown. He had 17 touchdowns his year at New Mexico. And he also, typically I'd be scared of a 24-year-old running back. But one, he's a 7th round pick, so if he plays for you, his rookie contract, and then that's it. Like, kind of who cares? All due respect. But he also only carried the ball 88 times his first 2 years at Alabama State. So it's not like he's got 1,000 carries on him in college football. He's got 530, which is still a decent chunk, but is not some absolutely bananas amount. And he's had a year off, basically. So he's probably a little fresher, even if he's a little bit older. But as a runner, it's not always the prettiest. It's not always like this incredible. Like when you watch Lane run, we mentioned he has that running back kind of low to the ground, on balance. This dude's just slippery. Like he's got a way of just staying on his feet, and sometimes it looks like he's salsa dancing, and he's like able to turn his body. And there's one run where he like stays on the sideline, and it feels like he's about to get knocked out of bounds 3 times, and he just, it's not like he bounces off guys. He just kind of keeps moving, and somehow his feet stay in bounds, and then he's able to re-square his body and finish off the run into the end zone. Watching him run is very cool. I know you said you would talk to Mike Renner about him. He's one of Renner's favorite runners in the draft, and I 1,000% get why after watching him.
Yeah, and I think like we're gonna make a comparison. He reminds me like a little bit in this draft class of like Ashton Genty, in the sense that like Ashton Genty's superpowers, he's got great contact balance, and I feel like Merritt is kind of in the same bucket or same boat with how he kind of is able to, like, he just kind of can absorb stuff. And the other thing about him is he's got this great kind of, like they call it riding the wave. So like when you're running a zone play or running duo, like the run's kind of moving this way, right? And the back's kind of cutting back against the grain. And his ability to find the crease and like maximize bad runs is really cool, And again, like he didn't play last year, and I think that's probably one of the reasons he's down being drafted where he's at. But again, like just a great job of finding a talented player who has a skill set, who has an ability that I think is NFL transferable. Like we talked about Kain's athleticism. I think that's 100% viable. His coverage ability, his kind of versatility, and Lane's ability, again, to find that explosive play, to be that explosive element in the offense. And for your special teams, you see roles, you see general plans, which I think, is really, really important to kind of be aware of. And I like it. It just feels good. Like when you look at the names, it just feels good to look at that group and be like, yes, like all 5 of these dudes could make your roster. And I'm not saying they will, but they could, and they could be significant contributors, whether it's on teams in the return game or with packages on the offense or defense. And for you to get that with kind of just 5 picks, I think is pretty good football, like pretty good drafting, pretty good scouting, and just good process.
No doubt. I like that you said he absorbs stuff, because there's some guys where they run and tacklers bounce off them. He's not that. He just absorbs the contact, and no one ever seems to get a good clean hit on him. Yeah. And thus he's able to stay up and keep going. And by the way, he had that year off, but he did play a second game this year. It was the East-West Shrine game. He was the offensive player of the game. So was able to stand out amongst his peers in this draft class in that particular All-Star game. Anything else on the class? I feel like you just gave a great summary. But if there's anything else you want to add, now would be the time. Otherwise, Logan, the show's over.
No, I think we feel pretty good. Like, I think they all have roles. I think it's all a clear vision. Great stuff. And I think we'll talk about probably the UDFAs sometime next week when that list is more final. Like, it's still kind of in flux at the moment. But hopefully they're able to do what they did last year and find a bunch of guys as free agents that make the team. And, because I think that was a big concern from a lot of fans was that, hey, there's not enough, there's not enough draft picks, but here's the second part of the draft. And if you can get some people that can stick and can be a part of your culture, that's also going to be pretty important. So
yeah, for sure. So let's plan on doing this. Folks are hearing this as of Monday morning or whenever you've listened, but it'll be in the audio feeds Monday morning and on YouTube at tail end of the weekend into the start of the week as well. So our next show will be the late week show, probably on Thursday. And we can answer your post-draft questions. So it's not going to be an official mailbag, but if you guys want to send some in, then we'll get back on the mailbag train next week. But we'll also take a look at the UDFAs and kind of wrap up the loose ends from the draft. We can also actually tell you what, let's not do a mailbag. Save your mailbag questions for we'll make it an official mailbag the following Monday. We can also give our thoughts on the rest of the NFL draft. So we'll do the Commanders, UDFAs, and kind of some other big picture thoughts on the draft, how other teams in the division did, all that kind of stuff. And that'll kind of close draft season on Thursday. And then we'll get back into our regular offseason rhythm, which means, Logan, we'll do a mailbag and then a mock draft, right? That's what we do next the following Thursday. No mock draft. Okay.
Mock draft for next year.
We'll have to figure that out. That way Logan doesn't have to study 300 guys for a mock draft by next year. Jeremy's probably already halfway done, so maybe we'll just call him back in. All right, that's our show. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Thanks for, again, watching and listening all draft season long. This has been really, really fun process this year. For Logan, I'm Craig, and we'll see you next time on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.